Three, two, hello. Hello, Nerdville. Hey, Paul, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Hey, all, my name is Matt Kimball, and I am joined by the brilliant Paul Smith Goodson. I like to call him the father of quantum and the father of AI. Um, but we are here to talk all things data center for this More Insights and Strategy podcast. We're at episode 56. That's kind of crazy, isn't it?
I can't believe that.
Yeah. Even with the time, we had that little break there, but even with that break, it's
Yeah.
man, that's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
You figured we'd have this down by now, but apparently we can't quite figure it out. But anyway, we are here to talk all things IT and all things data center. And before we get into any material, just want to say what we talk about is an exchange of ideas and thoughts, not meant to be taken as any kind of advice or direction for investing. And if you choose to take what we say as advice, then shame on you, not shame on us. Um, but anyway, it's been a big week, and we have quite a bit to talk about. You're going to hit on artificial stupidity. I kind of feel like you're taking a stab at me with that. And I'm going to talk about ARM and their announcement this week. Yeah? So what is this, Paul? Artificial stupidity. What is that?
Well, it's obviously not artificial intelligence, but it tries to come close to it. Sometimes there's dumb things that make sense,
Yes.
I think the way I look at AI and where we're at today and what's happening is, you can imagine if you ever run down a really steep hill. It's hard to run down the hill. I mean, you're going to fall and you're going to tumble. And
Yep.
well, imagine racing your biggest opponent down a 1 mile slope. At the bottom of the hill is a gun, and whoever gets the gun wins. And that's kind of where we're at with China and AI. The bottom of the hill for AI, obviously, is AGI.
Mhm.
And I think there's a lot of things we're doing. There's a lot of accidents that happen with AI, risky behavior that comes out, emergent behavior that comes out. I was just looking at a couple of recent ones, just to give you an idea. They had an experiment, especially agents, or they're autonomous and
Mhm.
roam all over the place and do all kinds of weird things, and that's one thing that really worries me. But anyway, there was a report this year that an experimental AI agent broke out of its test environment, roamed around beyond what its intended parameters were. It created back doors and connected it to itself to the AI infrastructure. And the only way they were able to control it, they had to shut the whole thing down.
Oh, wow.
Now that's pretty scary.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a documented case, and there's many other cases like that. So this downhill example with the gun at the bottom, I think is pretty accurate. And the dumb things that are sometimes important. Bernie Sanders and AOC came out with an act called the Artificial Intelligence Data Center Moratorium Act.
Mm-hmm.
While I agree in the principle, it doesn't. It's only, of course, for the United States. If it was like a global agreement, it would make sense. But just for the United States alone, it doesn't make sense. It was
Right.
just recently introduced in beginning of this month sometime, I think. And like every Senate bill, it has to be read twice, and then it's referred to a committee, and it goes from there. But what this one does, the key points on it, it would freeze the basic AI infrastructure, and we have a nationwide halt on construction and upgrades of AI data centers, and stop the expansion of compute. Model training would be affected. Experimentation would be affected. Anything and like 200 megawatts and above would be affected by this bill. It would block, various products. Startups would have a heavy compliance to meet and that type of thing. I mean, it would just have a complete chilling effect on what we're doing with AI, and just to do it alone does not make sense. It would undermine the United States competitive and security position, and it would give China and everyone else a head start, and
yep,
it would just tie us up. The Republicans' response has been, as you would expect it. They're arguing that it would kneecap our efforts, which is true, and allow China to surge ahead. It's definitely, I would say, anti-innovation, anti-growth, and something that we shouldn't. Even Mark Warner is a pretty conservative Democrat, and he called he said it was an idiot idea, and so that tells you where we're at.
Out of curiosity, the motivation behind that proposed legislation, is that a sustainability or a governance kind of,
Yeah, just Bernie Sanders is ultra liberal, and so is AOC, and I don't think they're looking out. They're definitely not looking out for the best interests of U.S. in terms of this. So
it just feels.
I wanted to highlight that. When I saw it, I thought, oh my God! And the reason I'm bringing it up is because sometimes things that don't make sense are being propagated now. I mean, like not funding or not approving the funding for half the government security. I mean, that doesn't make sense either. But I mean, it's had such a wide impact and long duration. I mean, who knows what's going to be approved and what isn't now. So.
Yeah, the AI thing is interesting. It's to what you said, I feel like this is one of those situations where you can argue with whether we're running too fast down that hill. And you can make a super legitimate argument that we all are, right?
Yeah.
But it is to what you said, it is definitely a race. And to kneecap us on a kind of global competitive space and global competitive level just doesn't seem like it is a good idea.
Yeah.
Especially when our biggest foe is taking the brakes off, and in fact has decided to quit running and just start, as you said, tumbling down for the sake of speed. You're going to cut, in any new technology, you're going to have to cut your teeth. You're going to bleed a little bit. You're going to, run into issues. There are always governance issues and other issues, but you can't let that stop you. You have to manage the growth effectively, but you can't inhibit the growth, right?
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So, hopefully this will get shut down or it won't go anyplace. And it's when we get to the point where we've got AGI or super intelligent AI, I mean, it'll have the capability to basically rewrite itself, and with the problems we're having now, the emergent behaviors that we're seeing, not a lot of them, but we are seeing emergent behaviors that are significant.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I just mentioned, where it broke out of its environment. AI goes out and creates new identities and all kinds of things now. So
that's a very Terminator kind of, like Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator kind of
So if we could have a global freeze on it, where everybody actually agreed on it, and it was monitored, and
It's the
I
same.
think it would be a good thing right at this point. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at SALT, you can look at all these kind of multinational treaties that have been signed in the past, and the fact of the matter is, there are good actors and bad actors, and just because we agree to do it doesn't mean the other folks don't. I mean, we're supposed to stop our missile development with Russia, and while we did, Russia continued to build their stockpiles. It's like you just we're not dealing with good faith actors, and when you're in that position, you can't. I mean, to say, well, we're going to take a stance and we're going to do it and set an example. Well, that's kind of a head in the sand kind of view of the world.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Interesting. Well, let's get into something more interesting. Or not more interesting, a little bit more upbeat, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe not upbeat. But hey, did you see this news about ARM kind of designing its own CPU?
Yes, I saw that.
What do you think?
I've got kind of a mixed feeling on it, but I think it's a good idea. I know you've got an opinion on
it. You want me to start with mine?
Sure, go ahead.
You can beat me up.
Can you do it without saying graviton?
Oh, don't say graviton. Oh. AWS will beat you up. That's alarm. So here's the deal. Let me set a little context first. I feel like I'm doing some inferencing. Let me set some context first. So, ARM has always been rumored to be in the data center. Back when I was at AMD, we were trying to do something back in 2013, 14, and 15. Our project name was Seattle, or Sticks, and the product was going to be named Seattle. And there were a lot of companies at the time, Cavium, a whole bunch of companies that were trying to do ARM-based CPUs. And there was a lot of success in building them, but they weren't being adopted until AWS developed Graviton in 2017 or 2018. And in that time, 8 years later, Graviton has really kind of been deployed very broadly across AWS. In fact, in the last few years, it represents over 50% of the new deployments in new instances that are being offered up to customers. Wildly successful. That lowers their cost. They can deliver equal or better SLA, lowers their cost. Everyone's happy. Microsoft has followed suit. Google's followed suit. Google has adopted an ARM-based CPU. So a lot of success. ARM steps back and goes, wow, okay, the market seems to like us. But while we are addressing, while these really big hyperscalers are enjoying the benefits of ARM, the ARM data center CPU Neoverse, there are a whole bunch of other potential customers, that can't get access to it because they can't hire a team of silicon designers, or they can't afford to contract with Marvell or Broadcom or somebody else or Qualcomm to go build a CPU. So what if we built our own? And that's what they did. So the name of the CPU is the AGI CPU. If you listen to the pitch on it, they focus very heavily on AI infrastructure and AI enablement. Makes sense. When you look at the specs of the CPU itself, it does optimization for PyTorch and some other stuff. You see why they're kind of referencing AI. But the fact of the matter is, this is a very good cloud CPU from what I see from the story and from the specs I've seen. 136 cores, single-threaded, really high memory throughput, 6 gigabits per second, which is just screaming. Dual chiplet design, so it's a more monolithic, if you will. It's dualithic, I guess, versus the very fragmented chiplet architecture that x86 has taken on. And it's designed specifically for cloud and for AI. So it doesn't have a lot of the legacy that x86 deals with supporting kind of very old workloads. Really, really kind of a compelling story that they have. What's lacking is actual benchmarks that say, specifically, call it spec, a spec int kind of benchmark that shows actual performance. They claim up to 2 times the power efficiency of x86.
Mm-hmm.
Performance per watt, they're talking about, extreme numbers as well. But, that I'd really like to see more specifics around that. But the storyline is really strong. They co-designed it with Meta. So it's going to go into the Meta data centers. Big, I think, a gigawatt worth of commitment from Meta, and potential for a lot more. OpenAI has embraced it. A slew of very large customers have kind of, or potential customers have said this is fantastic. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays. But this is a legitimate player. And if I'm AMD and Intel, I'm stepping back and I'm going, okay, I might have to recalibrate my approach based on what I see ARM doing. I'll stop there and I'll let you kind of weigh in on it.
Yeah, what kind of issues between ARM and Marvell and Qualcomm? And
Yeah.
what kind of issues are surfacing there?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think there's a natural and obvious tension that you just call out, and that is, when does a partner become a competitor, right? Or when does a customer become a competitor?
Yeah.
So AWS has invested a lot in Graviton, Microsoft with Cobalt, Oracle with Axion, Marvell, Broadcom, Qualcomm have all built up custom silicon design around ARM. The question is ARM going to cannibalize some of that market? I don't think the cloud providers, they're going to cannibalize any of that. AWS, Microsoft, or Google Cloud, they have their rhythm down and their custom parts down, and they're going to continue doing what they do because they've built very specific silicon to achieve a performance per watt per dollar metric that really drives profitability for their organizations. They're going to continue. What about everybody else? I think there's a natural point. I made this point to a journalist, but I don't know that he necessarily got it. There's this point where it makes sense to customize, right?
Yeah.
There's like a price performance and a cost element, right? So if I pay, and these are silly numbers, but if I pay $100, for every CPU to ARM to use AGI CPU, that's what they call it, their AGI CPU, or it costs me $120 to build my own, there is some point where even though I'm paying $20 more per CPU, where I'm going to make more money on the back end because it's so finely tuned to my environment, the power savings, so on and so forth, work in my favor, and it ends up being more favorable to me. And any large scale company is going to do that math and understand, where it's best to work with a Broadcom, Marvell, Qualcomm, and where it's best to just buy merchant silicon from ARM. And I think ARM will happily cede that custom space to those partners, and it will fill everything below that. But I think as we kind of first roll into this, there's going to be that tension and some kind of figuring out of, and there's always going to be a messy middle where it's like who goes after this business. I think that demarcation will be better defined over time, though.
What if the ARM proves to be as performant and cost effective as Graviton? What happens then?
You mean versus for AWS, like a build versus buy kind of argument? Well, I think it's from AWS's perspective in particular, because they're 8 years into this journey. And by the way, 6 years from now, Microsoft and Google Cloud will be where Graviton or where AWS is today, where they've got this stuff down to a science. I personally don't think AGI CPU can ever match what AWS is doing with Graviton. And the reason why I say this is AWS understands like kind of the parameters they sit within, the model they need to hit on a power per core perspective, performance per core perspective, and then the additive stuff, right? Acceleration you build into that architecture with pipelines and some of the kind of the lower level microarchitecture work they do. There's so much they do to optimize for that environment. ARM can never get there with merchant silicon, right? Because you have to build a part that addresses everybody, not just one customer. And because of that, I don't think ARM ever achieves that point for AWS. And I don't think they will for Microsoft, and I don't think they will for Google Cloud. And that's okay. That's more than okay, because there's enough market. They talk about a $1 trillion TAM at some point, right? There's enough of a market for the rest of the, with everybody else, where they don't have to worry about those 3 or 4 hyperscalers. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it ever gets there. And if it does get there, then ARM has done something wrong, because they've stopped addressing the needs of the market in its entirety, and they've only focused on one customer. That's what I would say, but I could be wrong. I'm often wrong. To me, the bigger question. Oh, good. Sorry.
I said, I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. I think to me, the bigger question is the x86 play. I saw some snipey comments come out of both AMD and Intel about this, like, around like, oh, show me the specific benchmarks. I get it. I get that stuff. But you got to think about this kind of in aggregate, right? So Graviton launches at AWS, and over the last 2 or 3 years, over 50% of the deployments are on ARM, right? Mm-hmm. That has a financial impact on both AMD and Intel. But that was an indirect assault from ARM, right? Because it was being done through Graviton. And you can say, well, the market's big enough and it's growing. That's true. But now ARM is bringing that model to every single company that wants to behave like AWS and Microsoft and Google and Oracle. And that is neoclouds, that's hyperscalers. You see what Meta's doing. That's large enterprises that have, deployed a bunch of stuff onto Graviton, into AWS, or onto Cobalt. There is a huge market out there that's kind of looking at the world a little bit differently. And so if I am Intel and AMD, this should cause them to pause for thought a little bit, and not simply dismiss it as some kind of gimmick that ARM is pulling, because I think this is perhaps super transformational in the CPU market. And I'll shut up.
Yeah, I understand. The way you feel, you think that agentic AI, that it's the CPU and not the GPU that's the issue?
Well, here's the thing. When you look at Gen AI, you look at agentic AI, you look at AI in general, while the GPU does a lot of obviously your parallelized functions, right? So training, the front end of inference, right? Kind of where you're doing pre-fill, where you're kind of building context. GPUs are absolutely critical. When it comes to orchestration, when it comes to serving up tokens, which are, is a different function, and actually delivering them out. When it comes to agent orchestration, that's a CPU play. So, while AI, generative AI, agentic AI is sees huge adoption of GPU, there's a corresponding huge expansion of CPUs as well. And so I think that's where I think ARM is thinking it can really make a strong play. Yeah. Fun stuff.
Do you have any idea what kind of benchmarks are from partners like Meta or OpenAI would support the claim that CPU overhead is a problem?
Well, I think, yeah. So there are There are a few benchmarks out there. The first if I were ARM, the first thing I would do is I'd get some spec benchmarks done just to give some pure CPU performance, like, apples for apples comparisons. And if they don't in the next few months, then that to me is going to be a little bit telling, because that's how you validate yourself versus EPYC or versus Xeon. The second thing I would be doing is I would be looking at ML Commons. ML Commons it's an AI. It's an organization that does AI benchmarking on training, on inference. It separates the two, and it looks at GPUs and CPUs and kind of total architecture. I would be getting some systems in for benchmarking into ML Commons, because that's where a lot of folks go to kind of build a comparison. The third is I would do some specific benchmarking myself. AI benchmarking is still a little bit early outside of ML Commons. I know semi-analysis does some stuff, but I would be doing some internal benchmarking as well that I can use to deliver proof points around things like disaggregated inference, or to what you're saying, kind of the impact of CPU on inference or training, and the difference between an AGI CPU versus EPYC versus Xeon or something like that. To me, those would be the worthwhile kind of tests I want to run, because you got to prove yourself, right? You can't just say we're better. You can't just say we're 2 times better or whatever. You really have to establish yourself and prove yourself. So, yeah. So, anyway, I could talk about this one all day long. Sorry.
Good stuff. I just have one question. Is there any, I guess agent to user ratio that it's got multi-threading, right? x86.
No, it's a single-threaded CPU.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is good, right? It moves all the contention out, right? So, yeah. No, I don't. You tell me. You know AI better than I do. Do you know of, like, I've had this conversation a few times in the last couple of weeks. Do you know of any reasonable kind of rule of thumb or measurement that says for every physical employee you'll have X amount of digital employees based on vertical or workload or whatever? Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I haven't seen that either. Maybe we should build out a tool that kind of does some of that.
There you go. Yeah.
All right. I'll be our next venture. Hey, so listen, I know we're coming up to the end here. I know you're busy. You got a lot going on. What do you got coming up over the next few weeks? Either projects or travel or?
Yeah, I've got a lot. I'm getting a little heavier into research into what AI is doing from a research perspective. IBM has come up with some really amazing work in the research department in terms of looking at things that's going to impact how future development is run. One thing they've done is they've built a what they call a half Mobus molecule. Mm-hmm. But basically, instead of traditional way electrons and everything whiz around an atom, with this one it spirals through the molecule. Oh. And they can switch it from a right-handed Mobius to a left-handed Mobius to a trivial molecule, and it looks like that's going to be a good tool for future storage and switching and that type of thing. So.
Oh wow.
I mean, they're getting into heavy research. They've got a couple other things that they've done recently. So, I've got a Forbes article coming out on that half.
I got to tell you, I don't think IBM gets enough credit for all of the innovation they bring to the market.
Yeah. Well, they use one of the tools they used was the tunneling microscope to look at this molecule, and of course they invented the tunneling microscope. So,
Yeah,
there you go.
they're like decades in advance, and by the time this stuff becomes mainstream, people forget that
Yeah.
it's all rooted in research from IBM. It's
Yeah, one
fascinating.
thing I like about IBM, one reason I like I mean, I spent 30 years at AT&T in basically all the departments, and IBM is much like AT&T from that perspective, and doing a lot of research and Bell Labs that they never got credit for, and IBM does a lot of research they don't get credit for, I think. So,
Yeah, to your point, and I'll stop after this because I know we're at time, but I look at a lot of these companies, IBM, Oracle, you talk about AT&T, even Xerox back in the day, the amount while the new startups get all the hype and excitement,
yeah,
right? And you can look at it in data, you can look at it in quantum or AI or storage, or while they get all the credit, a lot of times that all of that kind of interesting stuff was rooted, in these larger companies that are seen as old and kind of slow to move, but they're not. It's just they had worked on stuff 15 years ahead of these startups and kind of fed the market with it, and the market had to catch up with all this innovation.
yeah.
Fascinating stuff.
What have you got planned? Anything exciting?
I got travel, travel, travel. We got Oracle and MediaTek next week, Nutanix the week after that, and just we're hitting that busy time, right? That busy travel time for analysts. So it's going to be a fun couple of months, but it'll be a good couple of months for sure.
Yeah, yeah. You're doing more travel. So.
Yeah, you need to come out to. You need to come to some of these events with me so I can have a smart guy explain things to me.
Yeah, we did have a couple of good events that was fun to go to. So.
Excellent, excellent. All right, hey, listen, we are at time, so I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time and chatting. As always, super interesting. And for the listeners at home, again, please remember that this is all just Paul sharing his brilliance and me filling time. And but don't take any of this as investment advice. But please do like and subscribe, and check us out in a couple of weeks from now. And again, thanks for listening in. And
Yeah.
we'll chat with you soon, Paul.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.